Hello and welcome to Google Developers Live. We have an exciting show for you today. Today we'll talk about graph processing and Freebase RDF dumps. This is the first in a series of episodes where we'll introduce technology you might find useful for your applications. Let me first introduce our guests and hosts. My name is Jarek Wilkiewicz. I'm based here in Mountain View. On the Hangout, we have our guests from Sindice Technologies, Giovanni Turmanello and Harish Kumar. How are you doing, guys?
Hi, guys.
Hi, fine.
Joining us live from Ireland. And then from London, we have Dan Brickley. How are you doing, Dan?
Hi, guys.
Great. Let's get into it. Giovanni, tell me a little more about what it is that your company does.
Well, thanks. Our company starts from, it's a university spin-off, but we've been around for a couple of years now. And the idea is this. We have been trained, we've been working on very large knowledge graphs. Something originally was kind of referred to as semantic web, like the whole web as a database. And now that technology, thanks to big data and knowledge graph technology, RDF, can be delivered into enterprises, and there is a lot of use for this. So the company is about enterprise knowledge graph, being able to give to companies what Google has, what Facebook is working on, and Yahoo and the other guys. Now also other companies can have it on enterprises.
Great. And fundamentally, what is the problem that you're trying to solve?
Well, traditionally, when you think about knowledge, well, don't think about the classic computer science graph where you want to cross a bridge, or 7 bridges or whatever. I mean, think of knowledge. In general, it's entities and relationship. You have people and you have products, and you want to connect people, with their purchases and their products, etc. So typically, you think in terms of kind of like silos in a sense. Like in the database, you have table, you predefine what the properties are, and off you go, and you're okay because you know your domain, and those are the information you know about things, and you write your application. What happens is we live in a very exciting era where you might learn a lot. The web, so many databases are popping around. You might learn a lot about a single person, like 1,000 facts, and you know nothing about the others. And therefore, you would like to store all them because they could be useful. You could use it for your recommendation, for your customer relationship management. You want to store that, and you want to store anything about this other record that you have. So you have, you don't want to create 1,000 different columns in your database. But so what happens is this sort of scenario, it's a scenario where it looks like a graph in a sense. It's not any more columns orderly, but it's more like a graph, a knowledge graph, which is very similar, to what you have in Freebase, which indeed has 1,000 of different kinds of pieces of information. Mm-hmm. And that is very useful in a lot of sectors, where you're not happy with predefining your stuff a priori.
So just to try to summarize it, so the reason why this is important is because there's a class of applications that will benefit from this type of data representation. Is that pretty much what it is about?
Oh, certainly there's a class. I mean, think of application in a lot of sectors, from healthcare and life science, which is typical. There are so many databases popping up here and there on this topic. You might never know where the connection lies. So you want to get it and connect it and hang it to your knowledge graph, to your vertexes of information. You don't want to lose it. To consumer space, obviously there's so much information about each one or whatever. Needless to say, in technical publishing or defense or all this application where, let alone financials, for example, where you want to keep it all and you want to learn how to use it. You want to be able to experiment in new ways to use it. So definitely very, very applicable.
Great. So I understand Harish is going to show us a demo to help us understand how this all fits together and to help us visualize it. So should we hand it over to Harish now so he could walk us through it?
Yeah, just a second, just to give an introduction. Yes, Harish has been working at our product officer has been working on what today we're releasing, which is the Freebase SindiceTech distribution. And basically, the idea is to make it much simpler for developers to quickly spin something in the cloud. In fact, we're using Google Cloud today to have your own Freebase. It's your own. It's in your machine, already preloaded. You can launch queries as much as you want. You can see it and explore it. And it's not just the data, but it's also a set of tools to help understand the data. We pre-compute certain analytics. For example, we compute all the analytics, and you get certain tools which are based on the analytics that allow you to see the schema and to get very nice suggestions helping you how to do the query. And that is a distribution. Full distribution will come, today we have this first distribution. Next one, likely next month, we'll also have the search capabilities, and we'll go on with that.
Okay, great. So someone who uses the Google Compute Engine will be able to instantiate this image and experiment with the data, and that has the Freebase RDF dump already included.
You get your own Freebase just by spinning up the machine plus everything else. There is a specialized database for RDF already preloaded, Virtuoso open source. Thanks, guys, that have been helping us. And off we go with the demonstration.
As Giovanni was saying, the Sindice Freebase distribution allows you to get quickly started with using the Freebase dump. The distribution is packaged as a machine image for the Google Compute Engine. You can use this to create your own personal instance of the dump. Once you have your own private dump, you could mix your own data with the Freebase data and query it all together. So when you instantiate the image, you should see this page here. Besides the triple store that has been preloaded with the Freebase data, you'll also get a set of useful tools for working with this data. So one of the first tools that we will see is the Data Types Explorer. If you want to use Freebase effectively, you need to understand what are the types of data that are present and the instance counts for these types. So if you see here, you'll see the various types. You'll see music release track, music recording, and so on and so forth. So these are the types. You have people person here. So if you expand this, you will see other types related to a people person. So this is a cluster which contains people person type and the book author type, and you have 500,000 plus instances of it. So these two columns, the first column gives you all the instances which have both these types, people person and book author, whereas the second column gives you the count of instances that only have these two types. If you have types other than these two, they will be added up to this particular number. So this is a very useful way to understand what are the various types out there and how they're clustered together. Another useful visualization of this very data is the graph. So what you see here, for instance, is all the types that you saw there. Each node represents a cluster. A cluster is nothing but a collection of types. So if you hover over it, you'll see the types on the right-hand side. And the green ones are the clusters with just a single type. So if you hover over this green type, you'll see it's people person with the same count. So if you type in people person here, just select that, you will see in red all the clusters that have people person as part of that cluster. So if you look at this cluster, for instance, that people person, and then you'll see a range of other additional types. And what you'll notice is that there are a huge number of clusters or types which basically have the people person type. Whereas you have much more smaller clusters surrounding it. So this is useful to understand when you want to, if you want to decide how you want to use Freebase data. So the final tool that I want to show you is the SPARQL editor. So this is the interface to the Virtuoso endpoint. The thing is that triple stores, you need to know the URIs of the various types and predicates to be able to formulate the queries. What SPARQL Ed allows you to do is to get auto suggestions for these URIs so that you could formulate these queries very easily. So let me just show you how. So let's say we want to find some information about films. So you say F, and you want to extract the type of the film. So you type in film, and you press Control Tab, and it shows you a bunch of auto suggestions. So this is the URI for the film type. So there you go. And now you want to pull out some additional properties of the film. Say you want the label of the film. So you type in label, and it fills up the appropriate URI, and you can put in FL. And now you want maybe some additional information about the film. Let's say the release date. So you say release, and you can see the film initial release date up here. So let me try it again. So there you go. So that's it. So you click send, and you see the data here. So you can see some duplicate entries. This is because of the different languages. You can filter them out very easily. You can just specify a filter clause, filter on the language, and that should do the trick. So you can see that all the labels are in English. So this is basically how you can go about querying Virtuoso very easily with the aid of the auto suggestions. Incidentally, the auto suggestions are powered by the summary that was mentioned earlier. The summary is computed using Sindice Analytics, which is a Hadoop-based application for computing aggregates on the data in terms of how many instances are there of a particular type, how many properties are there of a particular type, and so on and so forth. And that is what powers the auto suggestions here. So that was just a quick overview of the applications that are packaged as part of the distribution. We will be including instructions as to how you could create your own instance. We encourage you to try it out yourself and let us know what you think about it.
Great. Well, thank you for running this for us. This is very interesting. I know Dan had some questions about kind of the technical aspect of the underlying architecture and so forth. So I'll hand it over to Dan now.
Hi guys. So I've got a diagram here from you. I'm not sure if people can see it on the screen, but can you talk us through how the pieces of the system fit together, like where Sindice plugs into Virtuoso and where that plugs into the cloud? Give us a kind of workflow architecture picture.
The new thing here is that traditionally what you would do when you're integrating data, you would do ETL, right? So you would spend a lot of time extracting and understanding the data, and then when you understand it, you can transform it and then load it into production, ETL. Now, and that is very time consuming. So what happens when instead of 10 tables or 15 tables, you have potentially 1,000 or 15,000, like in Freebase? I mean, you'd be completely lost. So you need a new step here, which we provide with this tool, with RDF provide, and all the tools that we put together, is the exploration steps. So in other words, as Harish has been saying, but there are other tools in the distribution which are quite interesting, and you should check them out. You get tools to explore the data. So it's what some people call pay-as-you-go data integration. In other words, you put it together and you can already query it with SPARQL, which is really flexible. Might not, be fast for production grade right away in SPARQL, so you might still need to load it into NoSQL systems or into specific indexes. And we have one specifically about a semi-structured information called Siren, which is an extension of Solr specifically for richly structured information. We'll talk about it next time if possible. You might still load it into specific systems, but right away you get the full power or a really powerful query language, and you get tools that allow you exploration. So it's much more iterative, much more explorative. You get stuff right from the beginning, more or less.
Thanks. So maybe this question is going to be a little unfair, given that it's such a general purpose architecture. But can you say a little bit more about the kind of applications you anticipate people building on top of this?
What usually happens is you want to build a knowledge graph for a company. The example is you build a knowledge graph for a company, whatever company it might be. You start with your relational data and you put it in the graph. And then what happens is you find out there is this beautiful data set like Freebase, for example, or others, it can be whatever, and you basically align it and put it together with your data, which is what you can do in the distribution, for example. At that point, here you have a very rich cloud, and you can already query from one concept to another. But then you can go on, and if you have unstructured content like text or technical content is amazing, you can extract concepts, relationship between concepts, or you might have data tables. That also can go into a knowledge graph, which is your domain-specific knowledge graph, your enterprise knowledge graph, and then even your customer data, so that you can have vertical products specific for your customers. And ontologies exist. Ontologies are, basically rich taxonomies, and you can do the reasoning and rules and enhance it even more to ultimately basically be able to leverage all this information together. How do you leverage? What do you do with it? Well, you do really interesting things. You do domain-specific applications. You do search, which is much more advanced than what you could do before. You have, you can do relational browsing. In a way that basically, I wouldn't be saying, it's for everything, right? I wouldn't be saying it's for everything. And for example, we were talking to people in the consumer banking space, and they said, well, no, because we know everything, that's how banking works, and we don't need to explore, data that much. We might need to explore numbers, but not types of data, not new kind of data. So no, not for consumer banking, but for analysts, for example, in the financial sector or whatever, that's a different story. They wanna put a lot of new dots together all the time, and this is the most agile infrastructure that you can build.
Thanks. Can you tell us a little bit about the way the RDF data dumps from Freebase fit into this architecture?
Well, Freebase, it's an amazing resource. I mean, let's say that you're doing anything that has to do with a consumer. You really want to be leveraging that. You want to be able to say, well, I'm selling this record, but because this record was, awarded this thing last week, you might want it, and that was shown in Freebase. Then you might want to put it on the homepage or recommend it. So any sort of recommendation, matching, grouping, and clustering of your content done in a very rich way across the graph. Freebase, it's the perfect crystallization point for that sort of knowledge. Definitely doesn't contain everything. You might want to enrich it even more. You might want to put your secret source of data inside, but it's a fantastic resource.
Can you tell us a little more about your use of SPARQL? In particular, SPARQL's great with factual data, but the more data you add, the more sources you mix, the messier it gets. How do you deal with SPARQL robustly with real-world data?
Most definitely. It's not like, you can hear from people that have been working on this RDF for a very long time, and we're not, the most, we're not going to tell you, oh, you should throw away everything else and you should use this. No, you should use this when it makes sense, when you have such a richness of information that you're really enjoying having this very powerful tool, because otherwise, the mess could be overwhelming. So there's no way out. The sooner you clean your data, the better. So in other words, I mean, there was Freebase had this refine, which then was Google Refine, and now is Open Refine. That's an amazing tool to start. That's great. So you avoid the messiness by starting with something like that to the beginning. Then there is a plugin that writes to RDF. So you can get Open Refine, get your table, try to align it even to Freebase, dump it directly in the SPARQL endpoint in this distribution, and you'll be able to query ready with Freebase. So try that. When you are in SPARQL already, because you already loaded everything there, SPARQL is not great for modifying stuff. It's mostly for querying. So what you do, however, is you have one of the most flexible languages to try to still do a query that would, fit the pieces together. You still would be able to do it. And once you understand how the pieces would piece together, then you would probably transform and actually make them fit better in loading phase. That's more or less, an iterative process.
And we could say that SPARQL is pretty well suited for the ad hoc kind of querying that you need to do with dirty data. So there's a good fit, in a sense, between SPARQL and data that is incrementally being integrated.
So for our audience that would like to experiment with this some more, there's a lot of information in today's session, and a lot of the terms might not be familiar to people new to the graph processing, the whole very rich semantic web community. What's kind of the next step for them? What do they do next?
Well, I'd say the first thing is visit the website and visit SindiceTech/Freebase, SindiceTech.com/Freebase, and they'll be able to get some very easy instruction to get their own Freebase and be able to play with it right away. And then there is plenty of tutorial on RDF and SPARQL. It's a very mature language, by the way. It's not, it's been there for years and years and years. And it's quite an interesting functionalities. And also we look forward to help people. So just let us know.
Great. Well, thank you very much for putting it together, and I'll make sure to check out the image on Google Compute Engine. And then for those of you watching, thank you for your attention. I would like to mention in closing that Google Developer Relations is hiring. So if you're looking for a career change in 2014, check out developers.google.com/jobs. Thank you, Dan, for staying up late in London. Thank you, guys, for joining us from Ireland. And for those of you watching, I will see you next time on Google Developers Live. Bye.